All right, welcome back to Perdido Key Gaming. It's 93 degrees down here on the Emerald Coast, baking. No rain in sight, so you know it's like it's time to get some yard work done or something. Anyway, here's another non-Magic the Gathering video. Today we're going to do some more role-playing game. You know, after Dungeons and Dragons came out and everything like that, in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons especially, you know, I mean, people were coming out of the woodwork with fantasy role-playing games and things like that. So, you know, Tunnels and Trolls and things like that, you know. But a lot of people came out with you know, games that they had a, you know, different take on how to, you know, game systems and stuff like that, like Chivalry and Sorcery and things like that. But this was the first of a bunch of games that had basically the same sort of system. You know, Kevin Symbieta, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He had this. There was some, you know, cyber, you know, future type. There was future type games, there was some mecha type games, you know, things like that. But Palladium, the role-playing game, you know, there's a couple of expansions on this one as well. This one's kind of old and decrepit. Played it a few times. Yeah, you know, it wasn't very enticing, I guess, because, you know, Dungeons and Dragons was very popular, so... This game is a little, you know, more complex, less complex in some ways. The same, you know, you had the same sort of races. You had your orcs, kobolds, hobgoblins, humans, elves, dwarfs, gnomes, no halflings to be found. I guess that's a good thing, right? You know, you had your race, and you had your profession or your class, as you would call it. In this game, they have hit points, pretty much the same sort of things as Dungeons and Dragons. You know, you got your base hit points, you build up your hit points, do your social background, your disposition. I mean, you should, as a character, you want to, you know, not roll for that unless you're, you know, a good way to do NPCs, I guess. Age, weight, height, a huge amount of insanity tables. Organically caused, environmentally caused, a mixture of the two, you know. You know, after a traumatic experience, you could become a little off. What they call character classes, they call them occupational character classes. You know, you got your fighters, your magic users, your cleric types, and some, you know, mundane guys, peasants, squires, scholars, you know, if you want to be one of those guys. But, you know, they kind of narrow it down where, you know, you had your D&D, you had your fighters, your paladins, your barbarians, and your rangers. They've got, you know, they lump the thief and the assassin in with arms. But they got a longbowman who is speciality, you know, soldiers, knights, different spelling on paladin. But then you have the typical, you know, different kinds of magic users, wizards, witches, warlocks, diabolists, summoners, mind mage, alchemists. It's skill-based. You know, like the original D&D, there was no real skills. They came out with secondary skills of some sort and, you know, built up on that, which became a totally different thing in 3rd edition and 4th edition, 5th edition, and everything like that. So, but basically, you know, when you're swinging at somebody, when you're doing combat, you know, you're rolling on a 20, and if you get a 5 or above, you hit. And then it becomes a matter of whether your armor takes the hit. If your armor gets wore down enough, then you start taking hits, right? So characters do get, you know, it's percentage based. If you've got a 12% pick locks, then you got a 12% chance of success. Okay, kind of makes sense, right? But then, you know, your weapons have a, you know, same as D&D, you know, that cause X number of hit points of damage, and then your strength adds up onto it, and your skills and your profession add onto it. You know, same thing, experience points, you go up in levels. So, you know, very similar to D&D. So, you know, which is kind of the point. You wanna have something that's familiar to those AD&D guys, right? So, they go through the combat system. You know, you can self-repair your armor, but you really need to get professional repair because you're only going to be able to, you know, do so much to your armor if you're not a, you know, armorer yourself. And, you know, your hit points damage the structural damage capacity of the armor. Once it fails, you start getting hit. Usual selection of weaponry, knives, daggers, swords, axes, bows, many different kinds of swords, kind of like D&D, and they all have a different reach and different damage factor, different weight and everything like that. Whereas I think in D&D, it didn't matter how much stuff you were carrying around. You were just assumed to be able to carry, you know, stuff on your mule or something like that. But, you know, there's a whole thing about kobolds are excellent smiths and sword dwarves. So, you know, their stuff does more damage and costs more. A big, you know, section on equipment and things like that. They go into magic. Basically, you start out, unlike D&D where you cast, you know, at first level you can cast 1 first level spell, second level 2 first level, third level 2 and 1, you know. In this case, there's the same sort of thing. I think there's 11 levels of magic, and they, you know, depending on its power. But you don't just pick up these spells. You actually have to find them in scrolls and things like that. So you initially know a couple of spells, and then all the rest of them, you have to find them. So, which is, you know, kind of a good way to do it. You know, wizards and magic users and guys like that, they're always after new knowledge. You can purchase magic, but chances are you're not going to find anybody willing to sell it according to these guys. I mean, your campaign might say, oh yeah, the guild will sell you anything, you know. But different kinds of magic, you know, circles and symbol magic and things like that, and summoning, of course, you know, summoning your demons and things like that. Wizards and magic users have different kinds of skills, you know, where speak languages more often, things like that. You know, they can do a little bit of combat, but they can't wear, you know, much armor as usual with the typical D&D type thing. But they can use, you know, short swords and knives and throwing axes and blunt weapons if they want. But yeah, they've got 11. You know, obviously, you can make up your own spells if you want. You know, I found it kind of weird that when they put down this list, everything's in, you know, non-capitalized. It's kind of strange. But, you know, like some editor missed out on something he was supposed to do. But they get a huge thing about the spells. Another big thing about elemental spells. And then, of course, you know, which is broken up into fire and water and earth type spells. Warlocks. What else I got here? These are all the, you know, witchcraft. Witchcraft being it's kind of a folk magic type thing. You know, they can, you know, make pacts with demons and, you know, devils and things like that. Diabolus, same sort of thing, except, you know, in the case of it's not demons and devils, it's symbols and magic symbology. I got a big thing on rune symbols here. You know, they kind of go into how these symbols work and everything like that. Wards. And your summoner is probably pretty self-explanatory. You know, you got protection, you know, protection from your demons, protections from the undead, protection from, you know, summon serpents, all sorts of different things like that. Power circles, the mind mage psionics. You know, psionics is rare, but they still exist, just like in D&D. You could have psionics, but your alchemist is going to be creating powders and potions and things like that for you. There's clergy, which is your priest, clerics, and they got different kinds for each one. Druids, in case you need your nature guy, summoning the forces of nature for you, except they call it rapport, right? And you know, the healer to make up for the, you know, the cleric not being around, you know, pass the cure light wounds, please. You know. But big thing on you know, sex and the gods and everything like that. And then into demons and monsters and devils and things like that. So there was a huge compatibility with the other games that came from, you know, Palladium. You could, you know, easy crossovers. So, but they were all basically kind of the same thing, all working off the same sort of thing, you know, just different equipment, I guess. But yeah, very, you know, kind of a classic game. Like I said, didn't play it much because it didn't hold our interest that much. But all in all, it's kind of interesting if you're into that sort of more detailed stuff than D&D was. Or, yeah, was, because now it's, you know, with all the feats and skills and attributes and things like that, it's AD&D is, or Dungeons and Dragons has just become, you know, kind of silly, you know. But anyway, hit like, hit subscribe, leave me a comment whether you remember this game or you know, you remember an older or another game that was pretty much around at the time and just didn't go anywhere. But anyway, yeah, leave me a comment about that, and we'll catch you on the flip side.